Okay, now we are going to get into our lesson for Module 4, Lesson 1, which again is identifying and drawing points, lines, line segments, rays, angles, and recognizing them in various contexts and familiar figures. So you need a piece of paper. We're going to start by just learning what some of these terms mean. So if I was going to use a pencil, in this case I'm going to use a marker, to mark a specific location on my paper, how could I do that? Well, I could put an X, but when I'm saying I want it to be specific, where's the location that I marked? Is it up here? Is it here? No, it's right there in the middle. So instead of drawing an X, I'm just going to draw a dot. Okay, because I want my location to be very specific. This small dot. I don't need any extra marks, okay? So let's mark another location on our paper. You can mark it anywhere, so I'm going to put mine right there. Okay, with another dot. How many of these dots or points could I draw on my paper? I could draw a ton of them. I could draw as many as I wanted and fill up my paper. So you could draw just too many to even count. When we draw our dots, they have a size. We're trying to imagine that it's a precise location. Let's identify our points by labeling them with letters. So let's just label this one A, and we can label this one B. Okay, see, these are points. So let's connect point A to point B. With a line. Okay, so let's identify what we drew using the endpoints. It's a line segment called AB. So if I was going to call this a name, I'd put AB, and then I would draw my little line segment, okay, to show that it's just a part of a line. Segments have two endpoints, line segments do. We can also identify it as, I could also call it BA, because that would be the same thing. Okay, so it could also be called by this other name. So let's draw a point C on our paper somewhere. I'm going to just draw it right here. Label it C. Okay, so we don't want to put it on A or B, but we want to put it across. Let's draw a segment for AC like this. Okay, so I could call that line segment AC right now, but could I extend it longer if I wanted to? Well, if I had a really big piece of paper, I could continue to put it in either direction, and if my paper went on forever, I could keep going on forever. Let's extend AC just a bit on both ends. So let's go like that, and then maybe draw it out a little bit like that. Okay, so here's a question. Could a segment go on forever? Well, there's a difference between a segment and a line, okay? So I am going to draw some arrows here to show that this could go on forever and ever, okay? And we would call this line AC. So see how I'm putting the arrows on the end? And then I'm going to put AC. So the difference between a line with these arrows showing that it'll go on forever and ever, and a segment like AB, or we also called it BA, has a beginning and an ending point. But whereas this line AC could go on forever in either directions, right? And it doesn't have points on the very end. Instead, it has arrows. It goes past the points of A and C, okay? So it extends in both directions without end. Okay, we can also represent it as line. We could also call it line CA if we wanted to. It's either way. But see how I drew the arrows? That would mean that it was a line showing that it goes on forever. A real line has no thickness. It just extends forever without end in both directions. Okay, so notice when I write down my line segments, I'm putting these little dots in a line. But if I'm drawing it as a line, I'm putting arrows. So that's important to note. Okay, so now we're going to draw a point D. Point D should not be located on the line segment AB or anywhere on AC. Okay, so we're going to make a D. So let's just put it right here. D. We want to label it. So now I have a point D. Okay, and then we want to connect point B to point D. So I'm going to do it like that. Okay, now let's make it past point D a little bit and draw a line. Okay, so now it's no longer a line segment because I kept going with it, right? So this one is a little bit longer than just doing the points. We don't call it a line because look, I only made it go, it has an end point here, but it keeps going in this direction forever. I know that because there's an arrow, but it does have an end. So the difference between this and a line, this is going to be called a ray. Okay, so a ray has one end point that we can think of as a starting point, and it goes on forever in one direction. So when I write this down, I'm going to just draw an arrow like this. I might even put a dot right there, and then I'm going to label it. So I'm going to call this BD. Okay, so B extends past the point of D. It's going on forever. Okay, but it always starts at one point and goes on forever. So now let's draw a point E. Make sure that E does not lie in line with B or D, A or B, or A and C. Okay, so we're going to put an E on here. Let's put it right here. E. Label your point E. Okay, so we want to make a line BE. It's going to be a ray because it's going to start at B where it's a point. I'm going to extend past it a little bit to show that it's a ray again. So once it has one end point and it goes on forever like this. So I'm making a ray. So it has my little dot and my arrow, and it's going to be called BE. Okay, so touch your point B with your pencil. Okay, trace along point D. Now touch along B and trace along point E. Okay, both rays have the same endpoint. Both rays are connected. Mine kind of looks like a corner of like maybe a rectangle or something. Do you see how they're connected? Okay, so both rays start at point B and they come out. So any rays like this that share a same end point like this is called an angle. Okay, so we created an angle. So we would call this angle DBE, and I would label it like this. Do you see this little symbol here? Okay, that's called an arc. Okay, and I'm going to call it DBE. Okay. Let's see if we can find okay, so I'm going to stop here and then we're going to do the next part.